We are in our final message on James, the letter of James. James has a lot of, as Rachel and I have explored and we've explored together as a community over these last few weeks, James has a lot of really interesting, controversial things to say. James is the younger brother of Jesus, and we talked about this a couple of weeks ago. Younger brothers know about older brothers, and younger brothers know all the kind of bad stuff that older brothers tend to do to younger brothers. So the idea that James isn't just a follower of Jesus, but that James would give his life up for claiming that Jesus is God is quite remarkable. But the other interesting thing we know about James that we've talked about over these last few weeks is that James has a really interesting way of communicating. And if you read the letter of James, it's like you're being shot at with a machine gun. There's like lots of different things coming at you. But there is one thing in James that just about everyone would agree with, that James says, that Maren read to us earlier. And it's this. Next one. God opposes the proud. I agree with that. You agree with that. God agrees with us about that God opposes the proud. Proud people are really annoying, aren't they? Why? Because they're always right. They're always right, aren't they? They're right about everything. Before you even open your mouth and try and explain something to them, they know the answer. They've got a better story than you do, don't you? You come back from a holiday and they're like, how's your holiday? And you start telling them how your holiday was. And straight away they're like, they've got a better story about their holiday that was better than yours, don't they? You don't have to look at anyone while I'm saying this. You just think about it. I mean, proud people are really irritating. They're really annoying. And we have this natural thing inside us. When someone's arrogant, when someone's boastful, it just makes us feel something inside, doesn't it? It makes us feel a bit yuck inside, but it doesn't just do that. What else does it do? It creates relational distance. Like if you've got a boss or someone in your family who is a proud person, sooner or later the relationship kind of deteriorates because you realise there's no one listening on the other side, are they? I mean, that person, it's like you're talking and they're not listening because they already know the answer. Or it's like there's this relational distance that is caused by being proud. They're always trying to prove themselves, always trying to sort of put their best foot forward in the conversation that you have with them, or they're always trying to put those things out there, and we have a natural opposition to it. And guess what? So does God, according to James. God opposes the proud. It also goes on to say this: God opposes the proud, but shows favour to the humble. We agree with God again, because we like humble people generally, don't we? Especially in Australia. We like people who are humble. I mean, you don't need me to tell you this, but you're just naturally attracted to people that are humble, aren't you? People who don't talk about themselves, that ask questions. They're great, aren't they? People who wake up in the morning and want to learn. They don't have all the answers already baked in. They kind of have their eyes open, want to learn. I mean, these people are attractive people to be around. They don't hog the limelight. They share the limelight. Have you ever had a boss who doesn't just kind of take your work and then claim the credit with the higher ups, but actually like sort of shares it with you? You're like, that guy's humble. This is great. God opposes the proud, but shows favour to the humble. And it's the same with the relational distance thing, isn't it? But in reverse. It's easy to become close to someone who's humble. You like being around people who are humble because they're easy to get along with. They don't make it all about them. They make it about you as well. And they make it about other people. And they're generally easier to be around. You don't have to try and prove yourself to them because they're trying to prove themselves. It's just a better situation, right? Is that right? I mean, humble people. We like being around humble people. And James talks a lot in chapter 4, which is what we're looking at today, about humble people and humility. So here's the first uncomfortable question. Which group are you in? Which group am I in? I mean, it's a bit like the drivers who were surveyed. All these people were surveyed, and 90% of the people surveyed said they were in the top 50% of drivers. I mean, are you a proud person? Or are you a humble person? Are you a proud person or a humble person? Let me ask it this way. This might be a little bit more uncomfortable especially when you're the person trying to preach on humility. This might be an uncomfortable question. Is inside you humble? Like, you might not be a bragger, because sort of socially, you don't want to brag. But inside you, when certain things happen in your day, are you humble on the inside? When someone says something or claims something or does something to you, does your pride kind of like stir up and flare up? Or are you humble on the inside as well as the outside? We'll come back to that in just a moment. But humility, as we're going to read about shortly in James chapter 4, is really important to James. Why? Because it was really important to Jesus. But the history of humility is really, really interesting. And it's basically this, and this is a longer discussion. Before Jesus, there was no such thing as humility. This is a historical fact. This is not kind of the thing that churches say. This is what everyone says. In ancient Greece and ancient Rome, and in all the kind of traditional honour societies, being honoured was what you aimed for. You never ever wanted to be low down, because that would be humiliation, right? Humility, humiliation. And in society, in ancient Greece and ancient Rome especially, you would never ever lower yourself below your station. You would never ever, the people at the top of the tree would never lower themselves to help people at the bottom of the tree. They would never humble themselves. That would be embarrassing. That would be disgraceful in an honour society. You would only ever humble yourself if you had to. If the king was going to chop your head off, you got down low. If in that society that's where you were, you would be there. But then this carpenter called Jesus of Nazareth comes along and starts teaching in a way that is completely world-changing. And he does incredible things, like he washes the disciples' feet. And his disciples, who are good, honest Jews, who believe in the honour system, and you give honour to the people at the top, they cannot believe that this Jesus is getting down on the ground and washing their feet, because that is humiliating. But Jesus says this: whoever wants to be the greatest needs to become the least. And he completely radically changes this concept of humility, so much so that today, if you were to ask the people in our community what they thought of humility, whether it was a good thing or a bad thing, they would all say it's a good thing, naturally, wouldn't they? They'd say humility, even proud people like humble people, like humility is a good thing. But it wasn't always so. It only happened when Jesus entered the pages of human history and completely changed it and made it a virtue. Right, I was just sidetracked to just say this. Humility was really important to Jesus. And it wasn't important in the world until Jesus came along. And James, in this letter, it's about 40 AD, remember? So it's about 10 years after Jesus has kind of gone back to heaven, after the death and resurrection. It's 40 AD, and James is writing this letter to these new Christians who are trying to work out, and as Rachel and I have sort of worked through in these last few weeks, how to become holistic Christians, how to actually have faith permeate all the parts of your life. And James is trying to encourage these young Christians to be humble, because they're still in their old kind of system and structure of, we want to be the best, we want to be the greatest, we want to be at the top of the tree. And so James is trying to talk about humility. And he focuses in chapter 4, and if you get a chance, and these chapters came in later, like they weren't there at the start, but in chapter 4 he focuses on 3 kind of key areas that humility helps you and can help me, and was helping the early Christians at the time. It helps us deal with conflict. Humility helps deal with conflict. Humility helps us confront the existential crisis of being a human being. I'll explain that later. And then the third thing, it helps us plan our lives properly. Conflict, the existential crisis, and planning our lives. Deal with conflict is the first one. At the start of chapter 3, James opens with this question: what causes fights and quarrels among you? What causes conflict? Now, if you were asked that question, you would say it's not what, it's who. I mean, you should see the people I work with. They're the ones, they're the people that bring these sort of things to me. It's not what, it is who. Have you met my mother? No, I can't say that. My mother-in-law's here, but I love her dearly. That's terrible. It's a shocking example because we get on so well. But you might say, you haven't met that person in my life. You haven't met this, but you don't know this person. It's not what causes fights and quarrels, it's who, right? Wrong. James says it's not who, it's what. This is what James goes on to say. He says, don't they come? Conflict, quarrels, fight. It doesn't come from others, it comes from your desires that battle within you. You desire, but you do not have, so you kill. You covet what you cannot get. You covet, but you cannot get what you want, so you quarrel and fight. You ask. You. It's about you. It's about me. The conflict that we face in our lives. It's easy to say it's about that person or it's about that set of circumstances. But James is making a really important point here that we can't miss. It's actually something going on inside us, this battle that goes on within each one of us that leads to conflict. Now, you might say, oh, Cullen, you don't know the person that I have to deal with. And look, if I had a coffee with you and you told me the story, I'd probably agree. Maybe I'd agree with you. Maybe I would. But the point James is making here is that conflict is not always about them or that circumstance or that thing. There's something that going on inside each one of us. But listen to this. This is a really interesting point. James says, even when you pray, so you ask, so you pray, but you do not receive because you ask with wrong motives, that you may spend what you get on your pleasures. Now that's a whole other kind of interesting idea to follow. But just on this for 1 second, it's possible to pray for resolution of a situation, but realise, that's what James is saying, that your desires and God's desires are different. Can you believe it? Did you know that? Did you know that that's possible? Did you know that it's possible that the things that you're desiring are different to God's? Seems ridiculous, doesn't it? Have you ever been in a situation when you're driving your car? There's one sort of up near Scotch College, which we take every day to school, and there's sort of two lanes that merge into one. And it's not really clear, they all work for the Transport Authority, but it's not really clear which lane takes priority. So quite often you'll find yourself locked with another car. You're on the left, they're on the right. And you don't look at them, because if you make eye contact, then you'll have to pull back and let them go. And you don't indicate, because that's basically giving up. That's basically saying, I'm in your lane, so I've got to indicate in. So then we're in Adelaide, right? We're trying to cut each other off, right? But at some point, there's this deadlock. Both the cars are going. One has to go first, doesn't it? Has to, at some point. Someone has to what? Give in, pull back. Now, what James is saying here, you've got your desires. God, the creator of the universe, has got his desires. At some point, you've got to decide what the order is, right? And that will help you and I deal with conflict. Practical example. A few months ago, the place I work in kind of the headquarters of the company, and there's all these different sites around the place. And, there's always conflict between headquarters and sites. It's just built into the fabric of the DNA of everything. But you try and get along and try and do the right thing. Anyway, this one particular day, one of the site managers, who's this big South African guy, really strong-willed guy, he picked up the phone and rang me and told me something that made me really cross that he'd done. And he had a different view than I. And he and I had this uncomfortable conversation where it was basically two proud people butting heads. It was just boom, 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 right? I know I'm the only one that's ever had that kind of conversation, so just bear with me, this is like a therapy session. But we butted heads massively. And it ended up it was like a volcano erupted, and two of us were hung up, I think he hung up on me. It makes it sound better if I didn't hang up on him. But anyway, it was not my proudest moment, it wasn't his proudest moment. But the worst thing was, that week I was due to go and visit him and have a one-on-one. And so for the next few days, I was planning, right? I was planning what I was going to say to him, how I was going to show him how stupid he was, how I was going to kind of trick him, and I thought I can get this guy and I can sort this guy out, And so I'm scheming and planning. And I'm saying to Miriam, what do you think about this? And Miriam's like, oh, I don't know, that doesn't sound too good. And then after a couple of days, I kind of went, okay, Cullen, you're being an idiot. This is not going to resolve the situation. And I kind of convinced myself to take a different path, to take essentially a humble path. Apologise, I didn't, let's try and work constructively, blah, 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 blah. We get into the room, and I'm there with him. And he's real sturdy looking, and I'm like, man, I should have worn a mouth guard. This guy's going to rugby tackle me or something like that. And just as I'm about to start, he says this, he says, and I won't do the accent, but he says, Cullen, I'm really sorry for how I spoke on the phone the other day. And I was like, man, me too. Like, and then we started talking, and we both brought, and then we hugged, and no, we didn't hug, but if you ever bring humility to a gunfight, it changes the dynamic, doesn't it? If you humble yourself, if you bring humility into that conflict space, now that person, they might never change, they might be the most impossible person ever, and they'll never do it, but guess what? You can control you. And James says, when it comes to conflict, if you get your desires right with God, if you humble yourself, it can change the nature of how you deal with conflict. Second point is this. True humility helps us confront our existential crisis. Now, you might say that sounds very dramatic, Cullen. And it is quite dramatic. Now, James, as you would have heard when Merrin read it to us, he's talking about people who are planning their lives and planning their businesses and really forgetting God in the process. I'm going to come to that in a second. And to sort of shake them, he says this. He says this. You don't even know what will happen tomorrow. What is your life? And then probably in the most uplifting moment of the day, it says this. You are a mist that appears for a little while and then vanishes. That's it. It's like, well, thanks, James. My mummy thinks I'm special. You're saying do you know, like, just take this analogy, mist. Like, it's just, you know, you're driving through mist and it's like really misty and then it's not and you don't even know. It's just so meaningless. It's like mist is nothing, absolutely nothing. And the reality is, he's right. I mean, your life and my life, we like to think we're really important. We like to think that the things we do really matter. We like to think that we are going to leave this legacy on this planet. I mean, do you know how small we are in the scheme of things? There are like 2 trillion galaxies. And we're like in one of them, on one planet. We're very, very small. Do you know that we've been sort of dominating this planet for the last, couple 100,000 years, Homo sapiens? Tyrannosaurus Rex dominated the planet for 2.5 million years. Do you know that? 2.5 million years. Now, I don't think the T-Rex ever kind of thought about this, because I don't think they had very big brains. I'm not sure. But did you know that for 2.5 million years, do you know what's left of Tyrannosaurus Rex on this planet? 32 small fossils. Did you know that? 32 small fossils. They dominate the planet and you end up with basically nothing, and smart people have to try and work out what it meant. We are like so small in the scheme of things. We are so small. And then we think, but that's okay, I get it. We're small in the scheme of things, but my life matters and I'm going to create memories. You reckon? Think about this. Think about this. After you die, and everyone's really sad, how long will it take before they forget you? Before people forget you? Then the next group die. Your kids die, and then they go. I mean, do you know your great-great-grandfather's first name? Your great-great-grandmother's first name? Do you know what they did for a living? Life is fragile. We're here today and literally gone tomorrow. We think we're really important. We think we're doing all these great things. But friends, as James points out, we're a mist. We come and we go. We think we're irreplaceable. I've been working on this deal at work for like 6 months, and I was like the centre of kind of making it all happen. But we had this holiday booked with some other families to take the caravan up to Uluru recently. And my boss was like, you can't go. And I was like, oh, you know, maybe I should stay, maybe I should go. But I was like, no, I'm going to go because we're doing it as a family and we wanted to really do it. And he's like, you're irreplaceable. I don't know how we're going to do this without you. And I was like, stop it, you know. They're like, you're so important to this deal. We're worried. That's what they said. We're worried that if a call comes through, we won't be able to contact you because you'll be on the road. So we want to give you a satellite phone to contact you in case we need you. They gave me a satellite phone. Do you know how many calls I got on that satellite phone while we were away? Any guesses?
No.
Correct. Not one. Do you know how quickly I was replaced? I thought they couldn't do it without me. And you know what they did? They did it without me. We are not irreplaceable. So this is bleak, right? We're going to die. We're mist that vanishes tomorrow. How do human beings, this is true, how do human beings deal with this, right? Our Hindu brothers and sisters, they believe in reincarnation. They think, okay, it didn't work out this life, I get a chance in the next. Buddhists detach themselves traditionally from the sense of self and don't desire anything. That's your way of dealing with this existential crisis. People who are into nihilism believe that there is no point. It's all hopeless. There is no point to this whole existence. All right? Most people, though, prefer a different path. They prefer the path of kind of positive distraction. Christy talked about distraction this morning. Positive distraction. I know that my life is probably not going to go anywhere and make any kind of a mark. Therefore, I will make myself really busy and just pretend, play pretend, and build up all my life into all these different things to keep myself fully distracted. This guy called David Gibson, because Ecclesiastes, the book of Ecclesiastes in the Old Testament, has a lot to say about this. He wrote a book about Ecclesiastes, and this is what he said. Let's pretend that if we get the promotion, or see our church grow, or bring up good children, we'll find significance and leave a lasting legacy behind us. Let's pretend that if we change jobs or emigrate to the sun, we won't experience the humdrum tedium and ordinariness of life. Let's pretend that time is always on our side to do the things we want to do and become the people we want to be. Let's pretend we can break the cycle of repetition and finally arrive in a world free from weariness. We play pretend. We just pretend. But what does James say to do? And what does the Christian faith say to do when confronted with the reality of the human existence? What does it say? It says this. Humble yourselves before the Lord, and he will lift you up. He will lift you up. Even though everyone will have forgotten you ever existed 100 years after you leave the earth, you have a heavenly Father that knows every hair on your head. And if you and I humble ourselves before him, he will lift us up. Don't you see how incredible that is? The Christian faith doesn't get away from the reality of the bleakness, if you like, of human existence and the pain and the suffering that we all feel. In fact, it confronts it head on and it says, but if you humble yourselves, you can be lifted up. It's the only way to truly confront our existential crisis. And then on to the third point. This is what James is always on about. He's always on about the practical, isn't he? He doesn't just ever want this to stay a belief. He doesn't just want this to stay something to believe in or talk about. He wants us to think practically about how we'll live our life. And he's talking in this last bit, and if you read this when you get home, it's in verses 13 to 16. He's talking about people in the Christian community who had become Christians, who believed that Jesus was God, and then were kind of living their lives. And he says this. He says, now listen, you who say, today or tomorrow we'll go to this or that city, spend a year there, carry on business, and make money. And he goes on to say this. Instead, you ought to say, if it is the Lord's will, we will live and do this or that. If you just go back to the previous one, Grace. There's nothing wrong with these things. Planning. Having a plan for your life is a good idea. It's good to think ahead. It's really important to make plans and to think about how you're going to kind of secure your future and how you're going to do all those things. None of these things are wrong. The only thing that's wrong here, that James would say, is it's without God. It's without ever asking the question, what is God's will for my life? You're making your plans, you're working out where to go, how I'm going to spend my money, what I need in my super, what I want to do, and you never ever ask the question. You never humble yourself and say, God, show me your will for my life. That's the difference. That's the difference. And you and I can live like that, can't we? I mean, we can make all the plans and we can have our trajectory laid out and we can know where we want to go. But if we never ask the question, God, what's your will for my life? Are we the proud person? Or are we the arrogant person? If we choose to live life, if we plan our lives without God in there, we might find that we're on the proud side, not the humble side. John Dixon, who's a famous apologist and professor of ancient history from Macquarie University, he said this. He said, the thing that made humility a virtue in the Western world was not the persona of Jesus, even though he was a humble guy, It wasn't the teachings of Jesus, even though he taught a lot about humility. It was his death that made the difference. It was his death. It was the fact that the God of the universe chose to come down to earth, not to seek his own honour, but to lower himself down and suffer the most humiliating form of death possible, the crucifixion. That was the thing that got the disciples over the line. Those first people, Jesus talked about it for his 3 years of earthly ministry. He washed people's feet. He gave the Sermon on the Mount, blessed are the meek, etc., etc. But it was his death, it was the action of his physical death that made people in this early period of the early church go, this humility stuff, this humbling stuff, this is a new way to live. This isn't just a nice idea. This isn't just a better way to go about my business. This is God himself sacrificed everything in the most humiliating form possible to demonstrate humility. It changed everything. And I think James, were he here, and through his letter, would say it's not about believing in the idea of humility. It's not even about saying that you believe in humility. What matters are the daily actions where you and I humble ourselves in sacrificial acts of love and service and humility. That's the thing that matters. Leveraging our high position, leveraging our resources, our wealth, our energy, our time, leveraging that not for our own honour and our own pleasures and our own desires, but leveraging it for others. And deciding every single day, before I make my plans and solve all my problems and fix and control all my future, asking the question, God, what is your will for my life? That's the kind of sacrificial act every single day that can make the difference. So I just want to invite everyone to stand, please. And I know we've prayed pretty quickly, but I want to pray a slightly longer prayer today. A prayer of some reflection and some confession as well, because we don't always get this stuff right. And this sounds strange, but often kneeling is the way that human beings through history have really shown submission or humility. And I am also aware that there's not a lot of room between the chairs to do kneeling. So I want to ask you, if you want to take an act, if you want to take a small step, we don't do this all the time at MIitcham Hills Church, I'm not sure we've done it before. If you want to take a small step just to sit in a posture of submission. If you are in a position where you have been sort of a proud person and you've been leaning on your own strength and making your own plans and not asking yourself the question, God, what is your will for my life? If that's something that means to you, as I pray, and there's no pressure at all in any of this, but as I pray, if you want to either kneel or just take a seat as a physical act of what's going on inside you, then I encourage you to do it. Will you join me in prayer? Well, Heavenly Father, we get this stuff wrong all the time. We so often make our own plans and we have our own ideas about what our future looks like. And we know that we can't do this on our own. We have conflict, we have competing desires, and we get this stuff wrong. And we think that we can kind of fix it ourselves, and that we can control it, and that we can kind of manage our way through it. We can play pretend and build our little empires. And yet we just acknowledge right here and now that we are just missed. And we just thank you that you are a great God and that you promise to lift us up. We can't do it in our own strength. We can't solve all our own problems. We can't fix our health or our relationships or our finance stuff, but we can look to you. We would become humble people, not just on the outside. We just wouldn't be non-braggers, but we would be people who humbly seek you, who humbly look to leverage what we've got, what we've been given, not for our own self or our own glory, but for others and for your glory. That we would be people who wouldn't just kind of power on ahead, but we would stop and ask the question every single day, God, what is your will for my life? And we just commit our lives and our families and this church and this church community. Humbly, we commit this to you right now. In the name of the ultimate person who demonstrated humility on the cross for us, Jesus. Amen.